Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Sam from Historic Travels and welcome to another video. Okay guys, so hey, as you can clearly see, I am back home. I can't tell you how good it feels. I've actually pumped out 2 other videos this week. What is going on? Am I going for a 3-video week? That's crazy. Anyway, I fully intended my last video to be the last video of the week. And then, last night, I was browsing YouTube, and look what showed up. Yeah, we're going to talk about this. Look, I had no intention of doing another one of these reaction videos, okay? And we're done with Brightside, okay? So, despite what you guys may believe, this isn't Brightside. No, this is not Brightside. And when I saw this, and I saw that it wasn't Brightside, it's actually by another YouTube channel called the Infographics Show, I'm like, yeah, I need to do a reaction video to this, okay? So, I know we did the poll. I know we did the poll thing and everything for my, I did say that I was going to do another, fun reaction video or something for my 150,000 subscriber, celebration video. Thank you guys so much for helping me hit that milestone, by the way. And ultimately, in that poll, we did decide that I was going to do a live stream where I was going to try to, repeat as many lines from the Titanic movie as possible during a live stream. And we will still do that eventually, but yeah, I want to watch this video. Where it's the infographic show, I've watched them before. And, I think their style is a little goofy, but, the videos I've watched by them, I didn't think they were terrible. So, even though they have a bright side-ish look, as you can see from this thumbnail, I didn't think they were as bad. But, new evidence about the Titanic, huh? The Titanic didn't sink as we thought, huh? Yeah, we're going to check this out. And I thought what better way to do it than, here on YouTube and do another reaction style video that you guys love so much. So anyway, guys, glad to be back. Thank you guys so much for all your support. And yeah, let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's been a while, but once again, welcome back to my office. This is where I edit my videos and everything. So you should be able to see my screen right now. Okay, so here's the infographic show, and right here, what I'm circling with my mouse cursor, this is the video we're gonna look at. Now, just kind of taking a look at infographic show, you can already tell the kind of content they're making nowadays. They said no military could be invincible until they saw the U.S. military budget. Okay. Here's the Titanic one we're going to look at. World War III begins. Every country goes to war. The ultimate battle royale is begun. What? This is really starting to feel like clickbaity nonsense. I mean, I know there's a lot of military tensions right now, but World War III, I don't think so. And also, who says ultimate battle royale when you're talking about a world war? Why do I feel like infographic show is starting to go downhill? Anyway, regardless. So, why the Titanic didn't sink the way we thought. And as you can see right here, I did click on the video last night just out of curiosity, watched it for 10 seconds, raged, and then turned it off. So I'm like, yep, nope, I am not going to watch anymore. We're going to watch it together, with everybody. So, okay. Here we go.
You might think you know how the final hours of the Titanic unfolded, but new evidence has revealed shocking details that completely rewrite the story.
Guys, new evidence about the Titanic! I can't wait! Listen, all of us Titanic historians out here, this is what we love. We love new evidence. Is it going to be legit? I'm sure it will be.
So how did the so-called unsinkable ship end up at the bottom of the North Atlantic?
It was not called unsinkable.
The truth may be far stranger than what you've heard before. From the...
Hold on. Wait. Okay, look right here. We are 13 seconds in. Is that how Titanic broke in two? She is sitting there perfectly level in the water and then just breaks like that? Is that how it happened? All right, 15 seconds. Okay.
You've heard before. From the moment the iceberg tore into the Titanic's starboard hull on April 14th, 1912.
They got that right. Good job.
off the coast of Newfoundland.
And then they do the sinking thing then. Wait, what did they say? Hold on, wait. I'm already getting really distracted.
The truth may be far stranger than what you've heard before. From the moment the iceberg tore into the Titanic's starboard hull on April 14th, 1912, off the coast of Newfoundland, panic set in. It would take less...
Wait, okay, all right. So the Titanic sank around 400 miles or so south of Newfoundland. Does that count as off the coast of Newfoundland? I don't think so. And did he just say that panic set in immediately after it hit the iceberg? No, that is not what happened. I mean, things on the Titanic were relatively calm for pretty much the first hour and a half to 2 hours. I mean, things didn't really start to get serious until like the final hour of the sinking. That's when people kind of started to panic, but it didn't really take off until like the ship had 20 or 30 minutes left. And even then it wasn't like chaos or anarchy. Oh gosh, what is 20 seconds? This is an 11-minute video. Oh gosh, I didn't think there could be anything like Brightside. Infographics, what happened to you?
Less than 3 hours for the entire ship to be submerged. But this wasn't a bolt from the blue. Over the course of 4 days, Titanic's radio operators Harold Bride and Jack Phillips had received no fewer than 7 iceberg warnings from other ships navigating the same icy waters. But icebergs were an...
I don't know exactly how many iceberg warnings the Titanic received. I probably should know that, but I don't. But I do know that they received them, but they were taking them seriously. You know, there was only like 1 or 2 messages that didn't reach the bridge, and that was because the Jack Phillips and Harold Bride were overwhelmed with messages and everything. But yeah, I mean, they were taking it seriously.
Occupational hazard for any voyage out in those...
Hang on, I'm going to rewind again, sorry.
Bride and Jack Phillips had received no fewer than 7 iceberg warnings from other ships navigating the same icy waters.
Wasn't his name John Phillips, but it was Jack to his friends? I'd have to double check.
But icebergs were an occupational hazard for any voyage out in those waters, and one that the personnel on board had dealt with before. But there were other factors at play, ones that the lookouts on that doomed ship never could have seen coming. The last winter had been unseasonably mild. The extra heat caused larger icebergs further north to fracture and split, sending huge, dangerous chunks of ice from the west of Greenland. Conditions in...
Okay, yeah, I do know that it was a little bit warmer and there were more icebergs, and Titanic was actually steaming towards a big pile of like field ice, so...
Iceberg Alley would be the worst for seafarers in 50 years, and some of the messages warning about this never reached Edward Smith, the captain of the Titanic. The reason...
Only a few. Most did. And they didn't always send messages to Smith. They would send it to whichever officer was on the bridge.
For that is lost to history, but most speculate that it might have been a result of miscommunication or malfunctioning radio equipment. The ship's direction was altered.
Huh. They actually did, okay, so they did kind of talk about the radio being down a little bit, but yeah, so.
Slightly in response to some...
Hold on, let me rewind.
The reason for that is lost to history, but most speculate that it might have been a result of miscommunication or malfunctioning radio equipment. The ship's direction was altered slightly in response to some of the adverse reports that did come through, nudging further south at a rate of 22 knots. But that
so what they're talking about, what the heck is this? Okay, anyway, so what they're talking about there, and this is actually kind of debated. So when they say that the Titanic was diverted further south, they were referring to, so when the Titanic was steaming across the Atlantic, there's a spot where the Titanic turns from going like southwest to more like directly west. They call that the corner. And that's like the final leg of the journey when it's heading towards New York. And Titanic had just crossed that area like a little bit before she met the iceberg. And there are some reports that the ship steamed further south, but there are other reports that it didn't. It's very up in the air if that actually happened or not. And I'm pretty sure in the inquiry, some crewmen said that they did not go further south. So debated, but I'm actually impressed that they got that in here. That's a very, very obscure piece of history. So, hey, pretty good.
Enough to get the ship out of the danger zone. And the little mistakes and instances of bad luck across the ship started to pile up, like a lethal floating mountain of ice. Because of the calm waters, the lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee...
Hey, they got the names right. Nice.
...didn't see any of the water breaking at the base of an approaching berg. And making matters worse, they had to make that call with the naked eye because the crow's nest binoculars were missing.
Okay, so the ocean was unusually calm that night, It was unusually calm. They got that right. They did not have binoculars. That was David Blair, who was supposed to be the second officer, left the Titanic and took the key with him. But as I've said countless times, and anybody who has studied these ships will know, binoculars would not have helped the Titanic on the night that she hit the iceberg. It's the middle of the night. If you look through binoculars in the middle of the night, you're just going to see nothing but black. The best way to spot an iceberg is to look for the black silhouette of the berg against the night sky. They would not have been using binoculars. That would have basically blinded them. Carrying on.
When the iceberg was actually within range, First Officer William Murdoch gave the order to...
Do you really have to have his mouth wide open and his what is uvula or whatever? Do you really have to do that? Is that what that thing's called? I think so, but
There's worse. They had to make that call with the naked eye because the crow's nest binoculars were missing. When the iceberg was actually within range, First Officer William Murdoch gave the order to hard a starboard, which would start the process of turning the massive ship to the left. But it was too late. The maneuver
I'm actually impressed. Okay, so they didn't really clarify it, but hard to starboard usually means turn to the right, but the Titanic used a thing called tiller commands. So when they say turn hard to starboard, it means turn to the left, not right. It's opposite. But okay, I'm impressed they got that right. I would have preferred them to explain what tiller commands are, but okay.
Only caused the iceberg to scrape along the ship's starboard side instead of hitting head on. And this was when things really start to get nasty. But to understand why the Titanic sank, you first need to understand why so many believed that it was unsinkable in the first place. Now, new findings from National Geographic are casting fresh light on the disaster. The first shocking surprise is that few of the people actually involved in the building of the Titanic would have ever made the unsinkable claim. Recent historical analysis shows that the claim was less a belief held by the ship's designers and more of a marketing tool used in brochures and write-ups to reassure water-weary passengers. It's a cruel twist of fate.
I'm actually kind of surprised right now. I'm actually kind of surprised. So yeah, the ship's builders and everything never said Titanic was unsinkable. They never did. The most official document that I know that ever stated the word unsinkable happened while the Titanic was under construction. I'm pretty sure during the ship's launch when they said that she is as unsinkable as we can make a ship, but not completely unsinkable. But yeah, that's actually... Yeah, I don't think they ever put that in marketing brochures or anything, but I do think that was just kind of a word of mouth thing that the general public had. But one thing that I do have a problem with here is, wait, let me see if I can, why did this, does this, wait, there, right here. This kind of looks more Middle Ages than 1912. Just pointing that out. Titanic didn't sink in the Middle Ages. That's just the vibe I'm getting, but yeah, anyway.
It's a cruel twist of fate that in all likelihood we only even associate the term unsinkable with the Titanic because it sank. But the rich passengers boarding the ship did indeed think it was extremely safe, largely due to one extremely advanced, for the time at least, safety feature. The hull was divided into 16 parts, each one with a door in between them that could easily be closed with a switch.
Very nicely done. Very nicely done. I don't like your Titanic model, but very nicely done.
Compared to the hull being divided into fewer larger compartments. Why did this make such a difference in theory? Well, if one compartment in the hull was damaged and started to take on water, the doors could be closed and the leak could be easily quarantined. Therefore, the ship would stay buoyant and the passengers would remain high and dry in the event of an emergency. So, how did we see a ship with a feature like...
Very nice. You could have mentioned the manually closing watertight doors. Those also had to be shut. Not all the watertight doors could be shut electrically. Could have mentioned that, but okay.
That split in half and kill around 1,500 passengers and crew in the freezing waters below. When the ship hit the iceberg sideways, a large shard of underwater ice slashed through the boat's forecastle, its upper deck. For years, people thought the Titanic was...
Huh? Wait. What? Okay, FYI, the forecastle or forecastle is only the very front of the ship. It didn't slice... Wait, what? Huh?
Was doomed by a huge...
Wait.
For years, people thought the Titanic was doomed by a huge hole being ripped across its hull, compromising too many compartments to possibly quarantine in one fell swoop. But this is exactly what the new...
compartments are they showing? Wait. Did I accidentally fast forward? Hold on. Sorry, guys. I know I'm backtracking a lot, but wait. All right, I'm going back. Okay, sorry, guys.
When the ship hit the iceberg sideways, a large shard of underwater ice slashed through the boat's forecastle, its upper deck. For years...
No, it did not. It did not slice through the upper deck of the Titanic. It sliced from the very front of the ship, aft, to just aft of the first funnel, breaching the first 6 watertight compartments. Okay.
People thought
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but the forecastle or forecastle, that only refers to the upper deck of the bow, right? Not the entire bow section and the hull and below the waterline. It doesn't refer to that, right? Let me know if I'm wrong about that in the comments, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. It only refers to the upper deck of the ship where the bow is and everything, like where you're walking around. I didn't think it referred to the hull and the below the waterline of that part of the ship, but let me know if I'm wrong.
The Titanic was doomed by a huge hole being ripped across its hull, compromising too many compartments to possibly quarantine in one fell swoop. But this is exactly what the new evidence has disproved.
Okay, so Titanic did not have one giant hole, and also their watertight compartments are all over the place, but they said that the evidence disproved it, so hold on.
Disproved, as was proposed right after the accident by Edward Wilding, chief naval architect for Harland and Wolff. The strike that felled the Titanic wasn't a continuous blow. It was a deadly series of much smaller holes. For over a century now, this has just been a theory, but the work of Paul K. Mathias, and later the Nat Geo team, has shown that Wilding's belief, largely discounted at the time, was actually the closest to the truth after all. Each of these holes, running in a narrow line across the hull, were about the size of 2 sheets of A4 paper. Individually, they seemed small, but together they breached 6 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments in an instant, sending...
Okay, you got it right. You got it right, Infographics Show. But your breaches are in the complete wrong area. It was not aft and 4 compartments. No, that's wrong, but you got the 6 right, so good job.
Seawater cascading in and dealing a devastating blow to the...
And Titanic did not sink aft first, okay?
Titanic structural integrity. Experts today have theorized that if only 4 of those sections were breached, the ship might have survived.
It would have survived, there's no doubt.
How did they figure this out when so many other researchers and historians had overlooked those details? The answer all comes down to modern computer tech.
Did people overlook that? That's always been known, right? We've always known that the Titanic could handle her first 4 compartments breached. That's not new information.
Technology. It was a project spearheaded by filmmaker and massive Titanic enthusiast Anthony Geffen, along with the Magellan Limited Deep Sea Mapping Organization and legions of historians, engineers, and other experts.
I don't know who Anthony Geffen is, but if he was with the Magellan, you remember I did a review of that Titanic game where you could explore the wreck site like a month or 2 ago. Yeah, so yeah, if you want to check that out, link in the description. But yeah, okay, so I guess Anthony Geffen is with that company. I didn't know.
Were the robots. The 2 remote-operated underwater robots, Romeo and Juliet, were sent down to the wreck over a 3-week period to collect as much data as possible from all the remains scattered across the ocean floor. Every inch of the Titanic was scanned in detail. Over 715,000 individual images were captured in 4K.
I think it's like 730, but okay.
A huge number of laser measurements. The result was 16 terabytes of usable data, or about the same as 1.5 million MP3 songs, or 6 million ebooks.
Okay.
The images were used to create a 3D scan of the entire Titanic wreck in minuscule detail.
Please have your breaking into animation be accurate. How hard is it?
This created, in the words of National Geographic, a digital twin of the real wreck lurking almost 12,500 feet beneath the waves. According to Titanic researcher Park Stevenson, quote, "It's like a crime scene. You need to see what the evidence is in the context of where it is. And having a comprehensive view of the entirety of the wreck site is the key to understanding what happened here. The big difference is..."
Park Stevenson said Titanic didn't sink how we thought? Huh?
"That this crime scene is 9 miles wide. And that's how we got images of the sunken Titanic that historians and researchers of the past could have only dreamed of. On the model, you can see the shattered stern around 2,000 feet.
Is that the stern? It looks like the bow. Okay.
Feet away from the rest of the ship, a side effect of the ship splitting in half and shattering against the seafloor.
Okay.
In the seabed around the ship, you can even see the personal items of long dead passengers. like watches, jewelry, and coins. Panic and chaos reigned when it became clear what was happening on the ship. Naturally, the crew did what they
Not until the end, but okay.
could to keep the rowdy passengers under control, with some reports even claiming that they fired off guns into the air to pacify the crowd.
That did happen.
They needed to get as many people onto the lifeboats as possible, but sadly, that wasn't going to happen. The Titanic lifeboats were large, each one capable of carrying around 65 people, but due to the commotion, the first lifeboat sent off had only 28 people in it.
That wasn't due to the commotion, okay? That wasn't due to the commotion. That was simply because there weren't a lot of people up on deck yet. They were trying to keep the crowds calm. People didn't know that the ship was in trouble, and that was basically it. Like, you have to think of it like this. When Titanic was sinking, like, nowadays we all know it took the Titanic 2 hours and 40 minutes to go down, but back then they didn't. They didn't know how much time they had, and they were trying to get the boats away as quick as they could, but they just couldn't get people to board the boats. They didn't want them to. Or no, I'm sorry. The passengers did not want to board the boats. But the crew weren't telling them that the ship was sinking, so they didn't know how urgent it was. They were trying to keep the calm. Yeah, but it's not like they could only get a couple, like 28 people in the boat because there was so much chaos and panicking. No, that wasn't the case at all. It was very calm on the Titanic until near the very end.
Than half of the people who could have potentially been saved on that one boat. That set a grim trend going forward that showed no signs of stopping. In an effort to control the crush of people, some of those boats had only a fraction of the people they could have had.
Infographics, you were doing so good. But it wasn't due to chaos. It wasn't due to chaos. It was the crew were trying to get the boats away. As I said, they didn't know how much time they had. There weren't a lot of people up on deck in the beginning. I mean, more came up later. But yeah, it was a combination of get the boats away. They were also worried about the boats buckling and collapsing. The lifeboat davits, they were worried about how heavy the boats were. The lifeboat davits were creaking and making a lot of noise. It wasn't because of chaos.
Families were split, with the women and children first law of the sea, meaning that a large number of husbands and fathers needed to stay behind.
Women and children first. You know what I'm going to say. Women and children first, but if there are empty seats left over, men can get in. Unfortunately, only First Officer William Murdoch saw it that way. Second Officer Charles Lightoller did not. Dang it, Lightoller, but whatever.
While it's easy to point to the mishandling of the evacuation as the reason why so many people died, even in the best of circumstances, a huge number of people would have been doomed. In an incredible act of overconfidence in the safety features of the Titanic, there were around 1,200 lifeboat places for over 2,200 passengers.
It wasn't overconfidence. This was how it was done in 1912. At this time period, lifeboats were not seen as a means to completely evacuate a ship. They were seen the idea was in the busy shipping lanes of the North Atlantic, there would always be another ship close by to help one that was in trouble, especially with the invention of the Marconi wireless. That's why they did it this way. They didn't think that they would need enough lifeboats for everybody on board. That's why. It wasn't because everybody had this religious faith in the Titanic. Now, don't get me wrong here. I do think it's important, and I do think ships should have enough lifeboats for everybody on board. I'm just explaining why Titanic did not. And in fact, every other ship before Titanic didn't have enough lifeboats on board. This wasn't a special thing because everybody thought Titanic was unsinkable. Meditation, peace, serenity. Okay, I'm calm.
Over 1,000 people would have been impossible to save no matter what. When the hull buckled and broke, the Titanic started taking on thousands of tons of water at a rapid rate, filling up compartments.
The way they're showing this is they're acting like the hull breaking happened, like this was the main reason why the Titanic sank. The breakup was the last part of the sinking. It wasn't like the reason the ship sank.
This caused a massive internal imbalance on an already structurally damaged ship.
Huh?
The infamous split that caused the Titanic to fold as it sank occurred between the ship's third and fourth funnels.
Wrong! Wrong! The breakup actually happened forward of the third funnel, and then in between funnel 3 and 4 from this is a terrible Titanic model, but I'm just look at my mouse cursor. The breakup happened here, and then two big chunks of the Titanic's hull and superstructure broke off. We now call them Tower 1 and Tower 2 in the debris field. Went from the breakup point to just forward of the fourth funnel. So that much of the ship suffered a massive structural collapse, and you can see that in the awesome animation by Titanic Honor and Glory. You can see this happen. And again, it was the final stage of the sinking. The ship was going to be gone in minutes anyway. The breakup didn't really do anything to accelerate the sinking. In fact, I honestly think the breakup might have allowed the stern to stay afloat a little bit longer, because like the stern had to go through a brand new sinking scenario, basically. I think that if the Titanic would have stayed together and not broken, the stern would have went vertical in the next minute or so, and then the bow dragged it down much more quickly. I think the breakup actually delayed the sinking by a few minutes. Just a theory. But yeah, anyway. You were doing so well, Infographics.
Right beneath the ship's smokestacks. This area was practically doomed from the start, given that the part of the hull here was less reinforced to accommodate the weight of the funnels. Only 700...
Huh? What? 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 The weight of the funnels? No! This is where the engine room and all, there's a lot of stuff in there that caused the Titanic to break in two, but it wasn't the weight of the funnels. It was the engines being lifted up, like all the Titanic's real heavy machinery was there, and then with the stern going up, this was kind of like it was basically, the stern was rising, the water couldn't proceed any further into the ship, so it was going up, the watertight bulkheads were stopping it, but the bow was trying to free fall to the bottom of the ocean, which was dragging and lifting the stern up, but the stern was so buoyant. You got the weight of the engines, the dead weight of the bow. You've got a little bit of a natural weak spot there. Like that's where like a lot of the ventilation was to the engine room. The structure failed. The structure failed. That's basically it. That's what happened. It wasn't due to the weight of the funnels. The funnels are very light. They were designed that way. I mean, what's in the funnels to make them heavy? I mean, the whole point of the funnels is to get the smoke away. I mean, if you guys came here to watch a rage, I think you got it.
6 passengers survived the sinking of the Titanic, and many of their lives were ruined, having left family members or friends on the ship to die. By the time the RMS Carpathia arrived on the scene, they were looking at the site of one of the greatest tragedies of the early 20th century, and it's been up to everyone else in the decades since to pick up the pieces. When closely observing photos taken of the hub fragments by Romeo and Juliet, the researchers were able to easily dispel the idea that the ship splitting in two was a clean break. In fact, from the damage on the edges of the fragments, it seemed more like it had been violently torn apart during the wreck.
Okay, that's correct.
One of the other stories that has long circulated about the sinking of the Titanic is what happened to First Officer William Murdoch, the same crew member who had made the diversion order just a little too late. It had often been repeated as a fact that Murdoch abandoned his post when things descended into chaos.
What?
But material evidence from the new scan shows us that this isn't actually the case.
Whoever said that Murdoch abandoned his post? I have never heard that in all of my years studying the Titanic. What? He was there till the very end. Okay, wait, they said it's false. They said it's false.
The positioning of the davit, the crane used for lowering lifeboats into the water, suggests that Murdoch wasn't in the lifeboat being lowered, but still on board, helping to lower the lifeboat with his crew.
I've never heard that he ran. I've never heard that, but...
He was likely in this position when a wave swept him away to the murky depths of the Atlantic forever. Another one of the long-disputed claims from survivors.
Okay, well, at least they got it accurate about what happened to him. I thought for sure they were going to mention the suicide thing, but... If any of you have ever heard that about Murdoch, please let me know in the comments. But I have never heard that before. I've never heard that before. So, okay.
Was that of ice pouring into the actual rooms of the ship while people tried to escape. This was long thought to be an exaggeration to make the stories of escape more exciting. The discovery of
ice was falling into people's rooms while it was sinking? I mean, I know ice came into the ship, from the iceberg impact. Some passengers had broken portholes. Some of the portholes got broken and ice came in. I think Lawrence Beasley was among them. But ice coming in while it's sinking?
Shattered porthole, likely smashed by the iceberg, suggests that eyewitnesses may have been right all along. But these pale in comparison to the most amazing detail that the new evidence has proved. As the situation completely degraded and the panicking hordes on the ship tried desperately to get into the handful of remaining lifeboats, you can imagine that there was a time of selfishness and struggle. Everyone on board wanted those boats, and they would do anything to get on them. Even
Again, I think most of this stuff happened at like 205, 210, like with collapsible C and D. There were a few instances with other lifeboats, like I'm pretty sure Officer Lowe had to fire his gun up into the air to keep some men from jumping in the boats. But it wasn't ship-wide chaos. Like, things only happened in a few areas, and again, later in the disaster. So,
knowing that it would condemn others to certain doom in the freezing deep. But that wasn't quite true. In fact, amongst all of the other things discovered by the Nat Geo 3D model of the ship, the researchers discovered an extraordinary moment of true courage and heroism. For decades, some witnesses and survivors of the wreck had claimed that there were lights on the ship all the way up to the moment it sank. Many thought that was impossible. Surely they just remembered incorrectly while in a state of pure panic. For that to be true, Joseph Bell, the chief engineer, and his team would have had to stay in the boiler room, shoveling coal into the furnace to keep the engines going even when they knew they were going to die. It seemed so improbable until the latest 3D model showed an open steam valve. These valves open up when steam from the boiler is passing through, generating electricity in the process. And those lights being on would be the only thing letting the passengers see well enough to launch lifeboats.
So, the lights were on. They were on. Now, they were on till, like, at least, like, it is debated when the lights officially failed. I tend to believe that most of the Titanic's power 100% failed when the ship broke in two. It did. There may have been a few emergency lights on here and there after the breakup, but they also would have went out very quickly. And this is because the Titanic had an emergency dynamo on D-deck that wouldn't have flooded immediately. And the dynamo was just after the fourth funnel. So it wouldn't have, when the Titanic broke into the engine room, the dynamo room, like where it generated electricity, all of that stuff flooded almost immediately. Maybe the dynamos flooded a few seconds later, but yeah. Anyway, when the Titanic broke into, the steam lines were severed. Okay, but the lights wouldn't have just went out instantly. I do think that the emergency dynamos, they would have had to wind down a little bit, like due to the drop in pressure. So I think the lights would have slowly dimmed more and more red, and then finally went out altogether. Probably, if I had to guess, 10 to 30 seconds after the breakup, give or take. Now the aft mast light, it was on until it went under, but it was an oil lamp. So, but yeah, now back to what he said about men shoveling coal in the boilers. That did happen. Men did stay down there and shovel coal in the boilers until very close to the end of the sinking. But I highly doubt there were any men in like boiler room 2 shoveling coal at like 2:05 a.m. I highly doubt that. I'll bet any steam that the Titanic was still using to generate the lights at that point was just residual steam still in the system. You know, because it does take time for you to use up all the steam pressure. So that's what I think. I don't think people were shoveling coal at 2:05 or 2:10 a.m. I don't. But, I mean, who knows? Maybe they were, but I doubt it. But, yeah, so that's basically it. That's basically it. Most of the engineering crew on Titanic was released, but a few did stay behind, including Joseph Bell. But, yeah.
Adding further credence to this, the boilers in the Titanic were concave, meaning hot metal contracted quickly when exposed to extremely cold water. This suggests that the boilers were still hot when the water rushed in. Joseph Bell and his team of engineers remained in the boiler room, knowing that doing so, they were going to die, and in the process allowing so many others to live.
I would argue engine room, but okay.
It's a poignant example of the power of the human spirit and how selflessness and compassion can still win out even in the most doomed of situations. But Titanic isn't the only vessel lost to the depths of the Atlantic. Watch Coast Guard finally reveals what really happened to the...
Okay, so stand by for my final thoughts. Yeah, okay. So, in conclusion, are they as bad as Brightside? No, absolutely not. A lot of the stuff they said was at least partially correct. You know, I had to correct them a lot, but it wasn't absolutely horrendously incorrect like what you would get with Brightside. So, they are better than Brightside, but even so, I would not trust them 100% with all, you know, Titanic information. Like, with whatever they say, I wouldn't make them my definitive source of information because they did get a lot of stuff wrong. And with all the other weird video titles we saw at the beginning of this video, they're not as bad as Brightside, But I still think they're a content farm trying to make clickbaity titles. World War III, free-for-all, battle royale, what the... Anyway. Okay. In conclusion, don't watch them for historical stuff, but they're not as bad as Brightside. All right, everybody. Well, hey, with that, thank you guys so much for watching. This video was a ton of fun to make. Thank you guys so much for helping me hit 150,000 subscribers. I would not be here without all of your all's support. And yeah, I'm glad to be home. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everybody.